pagers worn by members of the Hezbollah militia were turned into miniature bombs.
This is the lead-up to the Dubai assassination of one of the founding members of Hamas.
The Israeli military has said that it has killed the leader of Hezbollah.
Quote, eliminated in Beirut strike.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Clarissa Ward. I'm CNN's chief international correspondent, and I could not be more delighted to be sitting alongside award-winning journalist Ronen Bergman. I'm sure most people in this room are already very familiar with his work. He is a staff writer at the New York Times. He is the senior national security correspondent at Yedioth Ahronoth.
Very good.
I hope I pronounced that okay.
Your Hebrew is improving.
But I think what he's really known for is having the most compelling insights, nonstop scoops on everything pertaining to Israel's intelligence agencies, to the point where I believe a former Mossad director actually said, quote, that your work is amazing, or your sources are amazing, but it's also a little disturbing. How effectively you have been able to penetrate a world that, for most of us on the outside, is frankly very opaque. So I think let's just start with the news, because most of us are journalists here, or many of us are journalists. President Trump intimating that the war with Iran is really basically over. Secretary of State Mark Rubio saying epic fury is done. The framework of the agreement is basically almost there. We've sort of heard this story before, but what I want to ask you about is, where does Israel stand on this? Is Israel ready to wrap this up? And do they have a seat at the table in dictating whether or not that's what happens?
So in short, I think to both your basic questions, the answer is no. After all these wonderful things that were said about me, I was looking at this video and I was thinking who they are talking about. I think the best thing I can do is just walk away, because anything I would say is just, spoiling that. But anyway, thank you so much. I think that the drums of peace in our times that are just echoing from Washington, whether from the president or leaks that I believe originated from the White House, as happened before, are a little bit too mature, to say the least. I don't think that in a framework agreement, Iran would agree at the basics of it to give up on their, on their joker, on their ass, on the main cards that they are holding, which are the diluting or the giving away of the enriched uranium, freezing the enrichment, and all of that. I think that Iran would insist that this would go to a separate negotiation that would be decided somewhere, but deciding or giving up on their main weapon at the beginning, I don't see this happening, and I think that what we will already hearing from Iran is that this is far from being over. And I think Trump is using leaks of success in the negotiation that didn't happen as a tactic in the negotiation. The second is about Israel. Israel, and this is something I think the negotiation could go this way or the other, but what would not happen is that the US would not be considering Israel opinion, not in when and not in how, on what terms Israel or the war is over. Israel is totally sidelined. It gets some updates from the US, usually when it's getting close to a ceasefire agreement, ceasefire on Lebanon agreement. But all the rest is dependent on Israel getting feed from sources all over the world about what its ally in the war is doing. And I think while Israel had a profound role, while Prime Minister Netanyahu had a profound role in convincing President Trump and his team to go to the war, while Israel and the US Air Forces shared 50-50, 60-40 on the task in the skies above Iran, when it comes to the decision on when and how to end the war, Israel is totally out of the room, not by the table. And I think this dictates back to where this is all started. And I think that it also projects to the disappointment, if not from President Trump, who is very hard to read, but at least from high-rank American officials that believe that Israel promised something that it did not or could not or wasn't delivered.
So help us understand that, because from what I have been led to believe, Mossad effectively sold this to Prime Minister Netanyahu as a slam dunk. Regime change in Iran, totally doable. Here's how we do it. How did they get it so very wrong?
So I assume that if we would have someone from Israeli intelligence representing the point of view of Mossad, that person would say, we didn't get it wrong, we just didn't do it. Because we were stopped by President Trump on the verge of starting what they called phase 2, which is the Kurdish invasion into the Iranian Kurdistan. It's not the only, but it's a main component that, all the rest collapse if it doesn't happen. This was presented to the president when he had Prime Minister Netanyahu by him at the Situation Room, and they had Israeli officials on the screen of the encrypted conference call. And everything was presented to the president in many details, to which he said, according to some people who sat in the room and in the conference call, he said, okay, I got it. Now, I speak very little English, but you will tell me what's the meaning of, okay, I got it. I'm in favor, I'm against, I accept, I approve. And it turns out that not all of these parts of the puzzle were put together. And at the end, it turns out that President Trump objects launching the courts. So Mossad can say, well, they didn't let us go. If they would let us, we would be successful. If they would let us tomorrow morning, we could be successful. Others would claim that the sheer idea that an intelligence agency from afar, without boots on the ground, is able to topple the regime, such a strong regime in a country of 19 million people, almost the size of Europe, by itself is, I'm trying to look for some mild term in English, it's presumptuous.
Yes.
And I think that there was something in the successes of the Mossad that are undoubted, the Pages operation and others, that led people believe that if someone is able to run such an unbelievable operation like the Pages, he can also topple the regime in a country like Iran. And all of that has been used by Prime Minister Netanyahu to convince President Trump, who was led to believe that this is just another Venezuela.
So basically, President Trump got spun on this war by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was spun, in a sense, by Mossad.
Well, I think that the people speaking on that call, on that meeting on February 11th, believed that this is doable. I think that there were not enough other voices, not inside Israeli intelligence, not in the National Security Council of Israel, not in the American National Security Council, the CIA, the NSA, Israeli military intelligence. I think that all of them were silent. They were silent because we are talking about two regimes. So I'm not talking about the Iranians, of course. But may I ask your connection with the organizers to bring me a glass of water?
A glass of water, yes.
If it's possible.
Can we get a glass of water for Ronen, please?
Thank you. So if these two leaders, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, they show very little patience
Right.
for anyone who says the opposite. And as far as I know, there was no one in that room or that room. And I asked people who were in the rooms in the preparations meeting between the IDF and Mossad, wasn't there anyone who stood up and said, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Sorry. Who said, why do you think that you are able to do that?
Right.
And I think that this was a combination of hubris because of the success of the pages and also lack of patience.
So, this is so fascinating to me because I was in Iraqi Kurdistan at the beginning of the war. And when I first heard this idea that it was been taken into consideration to arm the Kurds and it looked like it was happening, and no one could believe it. Everyone was like, this is so crazy. There are so many things that can go wrong. There are so many reasons this can backfire. There are so many historical lessons that have shown us this is not a good plan. And so what I'm trying to understand is what kind of intelligence, when you think of an intelligence agency and you have signal intelligence, you have human intelligence, you see these extraordinary feats, ruthless, but certainly historic, that Mossad has been able to pull off. Help us understand the kind of intelligence that goes into, for example, assassinating the former supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, versus the kind of intelligence that they're using to think, oh yeah, if we give some guns to 6 different groups of Iranian Kurds, we can overthrow the regime.
So first of all, just to do justice, this is not just giving some arms to some groups of Kurds.
Right.
This was supposed to be a combined operation, starting with 100 hours of the two air forces of the US and Israel. It starts with killing the supreme leader. You do not kill the leader of another country unless you want to topple the regime. By itself, this is the signatory that we are looking at war where all sides are not telling the truth about its goal. Ask Israeli leaders, military, political, ask American leaders, what is the goal of the war? Now, the goal of the war was to topple the regime and instate, maybe not another regime, but another leadership that would be more favorable or more comfortable for the US and Israel. This was the goal of the war. You cannot explain the goal of the war in any other way. The siege, shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. The US military brought soldiers only after like 3 weeks. Didn't they read all the textbooks of anything written about Iran?
Right.
I looked at my archive. I wrote about this first time in 1997. I was not the first one. There were many, many others before and after. I assume they read the textbook that Iran will shut down the Strait of Hormuz if being attacked under doomsday scenario. Why didn't they got the forces earlier? Because they thought that this is going to last a week. And why did they thought so? Because they were sure, or some were sure, that they are going to topple the regime. And this was a combined operation of influence campaigns, of controlling some of the main media outlets that are feeding information into Iran, with the Kurds, with the aerial coverage of the US and Israel. It happens during war. It's not just then. And they were convinced that this is doable. And I think that the voices, when they saw that Mossad was able to perform Israeli intelligence, such massive, and I think this goes to some confusion that Israel is suffering from. This is between the tactical successes and looking or be successful in the strategy.
Tactical success versus strategy. So let's talk about one of the tactical successes for Israel, the killing of Khamenei. You've said that the intelligence that went into that was 3 decades in the making. I mean, help us understand, because, obviously there are so many of these sort of audacious attacks, but that was the most recent.
So I think what is striking in the ability of Israel to assassinate the supreme leader was that they started the second war with Iran following the first one in June.
Right.
In the exact same way, they realized that if you want to kill someone or someone's, needs to be done in the first strike because afterwards they will all be gone in a bunker. They wanted to kill the participant of a meeting that happened in the same compound, not far away, the Supreme Security Council. And only in the last minute, they realized that the supreme leader is sitting above ground in his compound. Now, this goes to some psychology of the Iranian side. Because any child that day, so the night between the 27th and the 28th, with any access to this meticulous espionage tool called Google, will tell you that there is a strong probability that Israel and the US would strike as they did before. And he was sitting above ground, not even in the bunker. And why did that happen? And it's not clear. But what was clear that Israel killed some 25 Iranian nuclear scientists and military and intelligence leaders in the first minute of the operation in June. Much of that intelligence was taken from hacking and following the cell phones, not of the people they wanted to kill, because they all were deprived of cell phones, surrounded by bodyguards, but the bodyguards did not use the bodyguards did use cell phones.
They did.
So the only thing that Israel needed to do, complicated, but not that complicated, was hack the cell phones. And one of the bodyguards of one of the Iranian leaders was even leaving the location open, and he was tweeting on Facebook while on the job. And this way, even when the scientists and the military intelligence leaders were each one in very different place, Israel was able to kill all of them, attack all of them at once, 25 different places. The Iranians got that. They understood the breach, and they deprived the bodyguards from having any cell phones. And yet Israel was able to target the leaders again. And that can only happen if you become part of the foundation of the system, of the communication system, if you are there for 3 decades. Let's say if you build a bunker and you are there from day one and your guys are part of the builders, you have an agent that was recruited, he can put all sorts of things into the machinery and the electronic systems that are part of that. And it goes to surveillance, but it also goes to some kinetic operations called button operation, meaning you intercept a supply chain of certain gear, certain equipment, and you either sabotage, you either put some intelligence surveillance mechanism inside it, or you put explosive.
Can I ask you what might sound like a really stupid question, but I think everybody in here probably wants to know? When we see these ridiculous, of course, Hollywood shows like Tehran, people are curious. Are there Mossad agents inside Iran? How effectively, we've talked about the technical side and we understand that, but has there been an actual penetration of the IRGC in terms of recruiting people on the ground, maybe not Israeli spies there, but recruiting Iranians to turn against their own government?
So not long ago, I got a call from a famous European journalist, who I'm not going to name because of reasons you'll understand in a minute. And he says, Ronen, can we speak about Mossad assassinations operation in Iran? I said, sure, and we started to speak. And then at a certain point, he said, no, Ronen, I think you got it wrong. I said, okay, please explain. He said, because I saw that in the TV series Tehran, they're doing it differently. And I thought it's a documentary of sorts that I didn't. And then he said, no, the one on Apple. I said, but you know these are actors. He said, yeah, but it's based on a true story. No, it's not. I always say that the real world of intelligence is not less interesting or more interesting than what we see in the TV series and the movies, but it's just totally different. And one of the things that now is leading the new world of intelligence is the biometric documentation. Israel has a problem with using the same kind of cover stories, legends,
Right.
as it did 30 years ago. Former Mossad deputy chief, the one who captured Eichmann, Rafi Eitan, told me that in the 50s and 60s, it was so easy for us to fabricate documentation that sometimes we forged passports of countries that do not exist. And so nowadays, it's not just changing the photograph. The biometrics are embedded into the passport, but also into the framework, the computer framework of the country that produced that. Very, very hard. Very hard to have something like Tehran.
Okay.
And then you are dependent mainly on agents that are recruited from the country or the organization. And this gave birth to a new kind of agent. It's called the warrior agent. So not just a nuclear scientist recruited and just delivering information, but someone that you can make travel out of to somewhere out of Iran, get training, and he will be an active agent, a kinetic agent. And much of what we see, the vast majority of what we see happening in Iran from the ground, the drones, the stealing of the Iranian nuclear archive, much of the assassinations, the killing of Fakhrizadeh, the nuclear scientist, by all of that, much of that, almost all of that is done by Iranians that were recruited from Iran, traveling out, getting training, usually in places that are not Israel. Imagine how
The
complicated.
logistics alone. I'm conscious that we have very little time left. I have to ask you.
We're going to violate it, no?
I know we're going to violate it. I have two questions, but I'm going to try to combine into one and just try to give a very quick answer because we don't want to do too much violating. But whenever someone leaks, they have an agenda, right?
Sure.
And you are probably getting information from people all the time who have an agenda. You also have Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling you an enemy of the state. You have the Iranians at one point trying to lure you into a trap to meet them in Istanbul. In 1 minute or less, how do you stay focused and keep the information straight in your head? What's the difference between spin and what's real?
These are two questions, 30 seconds each. The first one, how do you stay focused? Sometimes it's hard. You need to cover war. You need to be inside the fire, whether in Ukraine or in Gaza or in the communities by Gaza. And at the same time, you fight poison machines, propaganda machines, that all of their goal, the mechanism and their target is to try and either destroy you or intimidate you, that you do not do your job with having a critical view and a truthful view of the regime, of the prime minister. This is hard because you feel that it's all around you. It's attacking you from all sides, and it takes a minute to understand it's not all sides. It's just one side is attacking you, dressing up, covering up as if it's coming from all over. And Benjamin Netanyahu and his followers created the most powerful propaganda machine, I believe, on the face of the earth. And it's reshaping or rebranding history. If you go to any place in Israel, I'm told by experts, and you run a poll, even in Good Day for Democracy, you'll get between 25 and 30% of people that are convinced that the Shin Bet, the Israeli Internal Security Service, who is in charge of counterterrorism, not just made a mistake, not just failed, not just had the wrong assessment, all of this is true, but they were in cahoot before October 7 with Hamas. Their chief was in cahoot with Yahya Sinwar in order to spoil it for Bibi, and they planned together October 7. Now, this is totally nonsense. You get 30% believing in that, and 100% of the 30% are the direct result of the conspiracy theories that were spread by the poison machine of the followers of Benjamin Netanyahu. So this is one, to stay focused. This is a very good question, and this is the most important thing. The other one about sources spinning you, I would say suspect always, corroborate always, And in many cases, this is really my luck and my honor to be part of the New York Times team, where we work in teams.
Yeah.
We have people communicating not just with me, with Israeli intelligence, but we have people are in touch with sources in Hamas, in the Revolutionary Guards, in many other parties that are part of the coverage. And my great friend and colleague Farnas Fasihi, who's covering the IRGC, our great pleasure is that she brings the reporting from the IRGC, and it totally matches what I bring from Mossad independently. So we say that the only place on earth where Israeli intelligence and the IRGC can work together is the New York Times.
Ronen, Bergman, thank you so much.